The Times reveals that privately some of the lawyers have expressed concern that Mr. Mueller will stitch together several episodes, encounters, and pieces of evidence like the tweets to build a case. Specifically, quote, the fact that they are scrutinizing his actions under a section of the United States Code titled Tampering with a Witness, Victim, or an Informant raised concerns for his lawyers about Mr. Trump's exposure in the investigation. The report also makes clear that the special counsel still wants to question the president. However, as Bloomberg reported this week, Trump is demanding that he isn't asked questions about obstruction of justice under a proposal the president's legal team submitted to Mueller. Joining me right now is Peter Baker, chief White House correspondent for the New York Times, Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell of California. He sits on the House Intelligence Committee, and Joyce Vance, a former U.S. attorney. Thank you all. Let's start with Peter. Peter, the New York Times report is fascinating because it points out that just because you do something in public doesn't mean it's legal or make you innocent. You can do all sides of people, kill people in public. It's still murder. Your thoughts?
Well, it is striking that, you know, the things that President Trump has said on Twitter and said in public interviews, said, out loud, had they been in secret memos that were unearthed by subpoenas and revealed by investigators, people would say, aha, this is interesting. This is evidence perhaps of perhaps a conduct or a pattern of conduct that might be questionable or even criminal. The fact he does it out loud has kind of desensitized the whole thing. Everybody's kind of gotten used to it. That's the way he operates. There's nothing hidden here. He's very out front about what he thinks about Jeff Sessions. He's very out front about what he thinks about Jim Comey. So it's interesting that Robert Mueller is now taking a look at this and trying to weave it together and see how it all fits into a pattern. No single tweet, no single statement may be in and of itself obstruction, but the question is whether if you add it all up, does that add up to something like witness tampering or some other impeding of this investigation?
Joyce, your view on this, the fact that he's done things like saying, demanding, well, we've all heard about it, so it became public, demanding the loyalty of James Comey before he fired, demanded that he go light or let Michael Flynn, as National Security Director, off the hook. Or he said, tell the public I'm not being targeted here. All those demands we've subsequently learned he was doing, they could potentially be, well, I'm asking you, obstruction of justice.
Peter's exactly right. Trump doing this in broad daylight has desensitized the public, but that desensitization won't carry over to Bob Mueller. He'll look at Trump's conduct, he'll look at his state of mind, and then within this very specific statutory framework that exists under law, he'll decide whether there's enough evidence to prove some form of obstruction. And that's why all of this conduct matters, Chris. These tweets are perhaps a window into Trump's state of mind. If they're tweets that can be attributed to him personally, they run through this course of conduct from the firing of Jim Comey to the efforts to humiliate Jeff Sessions into resigning, on through the false explanation for the Trump Towers meeting, that entire course of conduct. So, yes, Mueller will definitely try to stitch all of this together and see if obstruction emerges at the end.
Does the fact that he tweets at dawn, apparently reads the paper and then starts tweeting, that it's done so impulsively and out of apparent passion, does that add to the question of motive?
You know, I think it does. I think what happens here is you get a sense of his true state of mind. And that's the most difficult part of an obstruction case, because the government has to prove that you acted with an intent to keep a witness from showing up to testify, or with an intent to destroy evidence, or any of the other numbers of types of conduct that are prohibited. So to the extent, you know, it's usually the eyes that are the window to the soul. Here with the president, it's his tweets.
Let me get Congressman Swalwell. It seems to me, watching this, and we've all been watching this in plain sight, these tweets, which go to everybody, he's constantly pounding the Attorney General. How come you've recused yourself? It's almost like, take charge of the case and get me out of it. That's right. Just seems like he's constantly pounding Jeff Sessions to intervene on his behalf, pull back on the investigation, and yank Robert Mueller out of his seat.
And there's no Twitter client privilege in the law. So that's not going to save him. And, you know, I've heard this before when I was a prosecutor. Oh, who would be so stupid to say something, you know, that everyone could see? Well,
that's what Rudy, by the way, is saying.
Yeah.
Rudy says he must be innocent of these charges because he did them openly.
Yeah, the prisons aren't filled with Rhodes Scholars. They're filled with people who make a lot of mistakes that we're able to find. But right now, I think he feels emboldened because he doesn't see
anyone. I know Rhodes Scholars that aren't so smart, but go ahead. I mean,
he doesn't see anyone in Congress who is standing up to him. And so I think he feels emboldened to keep moving forward because he knows ultimately ultimately this goes to the Judiciary Committee. And when you look at that land of misfit toys and the people who are there doing everything they can to be his fixers in Congress, he thinks, well, I'm not going to pay a penalty because they're just going to let me keep doing it. They're not going to hold me accountable. I think that changes in November because I think the American people want to check on this president. They see him as a wrecking ball and they just want to be protected.
Well, meanwhile, in the Cohen case, the New York Times here again is reporting that the audio tape of the president's conversation with Cohen shows the president telling his fixer lawyer, that would be Cohen, to pay in cash to silence Playboy model Karen McDougal. Let's listen again to that clip, which was provided to CNN by Cohen lawyer Lanny Davis.
I'm all over that. And I spoke to Alan about it when it comes time for the financing, which will be...
Listen, what financing?
We'll have to pay you. So
I'll pay the kid.
No. I got... No.
No. Anyway, Trump's legal team has advanced an interpretation. I love the way they talk of what it said on the tape and the transcript they circulate, as the Times reports. In the White House version, that would be the Trump version, as per Rudy Giuliani, Mr. Trump told Mr. Cohen, don't pay in cash, and then says check. You can't hear the word don't, by the way. But according to the Times, Mr. Trump's team manufactured a dialogue to make it more favorable for their client. Repeated screenings of the tape do not clearly reveal Mr. Trump saying the words don't pay with, an omission that would entirely change the meaning of his comment. Let me get back to Peter Baker of the Times. Peter, you guys did a study, barely a due diligence study of that tape. You can't find the word don't. It looks to me like that transcript they put out was Nixonian. Nixon didn't want the tapes out. Nixon put out a transcript. Did they have a little guidebook at the White House? Do what Nixon did. It seems to be their pattern. Peter.
Well, it's a lot like the Helsinki thing just a week or so ago, but he said he meant wouldn't rather than would, right? Is it don't pay in cash or pay in cash? These are fairly important distinctions, and the question is, a tape that's not 100% clear, but as we've listened to it again and again, we don't hear the word don't. Pretty important distinction. We'll see whether the special counsel here's it the same way.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.